Hey, welcome to today's Tutti Hour. Today is Wednesday, July 14th. Today we have Carlos Sanchez-Gutierrez with us. Carlos teaches at the Eastman School of Music, and he was part of Bra Band that visited Soundscape in 2015, 16, and 17. I want to thank Carlos so much for agreeing to give this presentation with such a short notice. Our original composer scheduled was Ken Bueno, but he had a family emergency, and I reached out to Carlos on Monday, and he said yes immediately. So thank you so much, Carlos, and welcome to Soundscape.
Hi everybody. Thank you, Ayun. Thanks everyone. It's a pleasure to come back to Soundscape, a festival that that is very dear to me, that I very much like and admire, and that I hope can be held the way I experienced it, with live musicians and live composers and this skin and bones exchange, that took place in Italy, especially in Cesena, which I understand is absolutely wonderful. So, since my understanding is that we have 1 hour only, I won't talk too much. There's a piece of music that I would like to share, two pieces of music. So I would like to share those two pieces, say a little bit about what's behind my approach with those two pieces, which is very much a summation of what I am thinking right now, what my musical interests are right now, and then I can open the floor to questions if that's okay. And I'd rather answer questions or make or comment on what you guys have to say about what you've heard than make this a one-way street. So I would like to, I had titled my discussion, my conversation, New Short Stories, because that's the title of one of the pieces that I would like to show you, which is a rather recent one. But I will start with something else. I would like to share with you an older piece that several of my Soundscape colleagues, former colleagues and friends already know. It's a piece for solo marimba, and it is, okay, there you go. It is called Winikte. Winikte, I'm sorry, I'm having some difficulties here. Okay. Winikte translates as man/wood in the Quiche, which is the language of the Maya nation in Mexico and in Central America. And I'll just play the piece. It's a short piece, about 6 minutes, and I would like to ask that you listen to the piece, of course, but pay particular attention to how it unfolds, how the piece unfolds, and perhaps make some notes about possible comments that you may have about how the piece moves from A to B to C to D and Z, and because that's the sort of thing that I would like to talk to you about, this idea of musical narrative. And I think this piece exemplifies that quite well. So here is Winikte for solo marimba, and it's a live performance by Brand Blackard, a wonderful percussionist who is currently associated with the Eastman School of Music, and who also was at Soundscape a couple of times a few years ago. So here's Winikte.
You're still muted. Carlos, you're muted.
I'm sorry. I'm sorry. What happened is, for some reason, my mouse stops working when I share my screen, so I had to redo that. So sorry. So that was Winikte, and as you can see, Brand Lacker has a lot of friends at Eastman, a very enthusiastic audience. He's a wonderful performer. Can you all see the screen now that says "Cuando despertó, el dinosaurio todavía estaba allí"? When the man woke up, the dinosaur was still there. This is a short story written by Augusto Monterroso, Guatemalan writer. And I think it is the absolute epitome of the short story. It's hard to imagine that a story can be shorter than this and yet more full of connotations and possibilities, and indeed, a narrative structure. Cuando despertó, el dinosaurio todavía estaba allí. When the man woke up, the dinosaur was still there. This is by far my favorite short story of all. And I'd like to talk to you a little bit about narration, indeed, and about the narrative quality of music, and about the fact that I really don't see music or experience music in any other way. I don't think I can experience music in a way that doesn't go from one idea to another one through a process that is set in motion by the composer. I know that Stockhausen gave us the concept of moment form and the possibility of musical forms that were static, didn't go anywhere. I know that Andriessen also with the type created this experience of music that moves through time in a way that is really not teleological. And I know that Donatoni and Luca Cori is the expert on Donatoni here, but I know that Donatoni also took the concept of moment form and turned it into this wonderful, wonderful musical experience that he creates through the succession of panels in which time is frozen by process, basically. All of those are I know, perfectly valid and fascinating ways in which music can be created. But what I'm talking about is how music is experienced. And for me, music is only experienced in a narrative way, in a way that goes from one thing to the next, again, through a process that has been created by the composer. But how that narrative takes place, I think, is very much connected to the concept of play, and what in Spanish is the concept of something lúdico, as we call it in Spanish, something that has to do with having an experience with a material that is not at all different from the experience that we used to have when we were kids, and we had objects that we manipulated and gave personalities to and turned into our playthings, and therefore with them created stories or situations or battles or whatever it is that we did when we were kids. I would like to experience that when I compose. I would like to at least aspire to experiencing that. And I'm quoting Julio Cortázar, who is another not only wonderful writer from Argentina, but an incredibly succinct master at short stories and at the idea of creating narratives with the least amount of material that were otherwise expansive and incredible. And for him, as you can read in this text that I am quoting here, literature is really nothing but a game. It is a game that is to be taken as seriously as games are taken by children. And I love this example that he gives us here about how important a game is for kids, and how it is the interruption of the game that is silly. And the game itself is what's serious. So that's the spirit that I'd like to bring into my music and into my musical process and into my attitude towards the handling of musical materials. And this is nothing but a bit of a confession on my part, so I leave it at that. And we can talk about it later when we return. But I also would like to mention Italo Calvino, the Italian writer that actually inspired the piece of music that I will show you in a moment. And this is the program note that I wrote for the piece that I'm going to play for you, which is called New Short Stories. And I'll just read it. The words of Italo Calvino were on my mind when composing my new short stories. In this piece, I aspire to convey the qualities that provide music its quickness, above all, agility, mobility, and ease. I follow the thread spun by the first gesture, heard on bar 1 and present in a myriad of ways in the obbligato piano part, losing it 100 times, finding it again after 100 more twists and turns, and jumping around from one subject to another. I hope that the moment my initial subject appears in the narrative, it will already be charged with a special force and become like the pole of a magnetic field, and not in the network of invisible relationships. A lot of what I say here is really not I didn't say it, it's Calvino's own. This is part of his discussion on quickness as part of the 6 Memos for the New Millennium, this wonderful collection of lessons that he gave us shortly before his death. And I think this summarizes the kinds of things that I was alluding to. And agility, mobility, and ease particularly have to do with my approach to gesture. My music is very gestural, and I aspire to make it gestural precisely with a high degree of agility, mobility, and ease. And ease in this case, I equate to the idea of lightness, of levity, of gestures that float over the density of the real world. The piece actually originated in another shorter piece that I wrote for the Cuban-American writer Cristina Valdez. She asked me to write a kind of concertante work, and that's exactly how she put it. I'd like you to write me a sort of concertante work, meaning, a piece in which she, as a pianist, would be a main protagonist, but embedded in the overall texture of the work. And that's what I did. I wrote short stories, and I based the entire piece on this little motivic gesture here that is a soggetto cavato, or at least it is based on a soggetto cavato that accordingly I took from the expression Cuba Libre. Cuba Libre, of course, those of you particularly who are a little bit older know that it's a cocktail that is basically Coca-Cola with rum, but also, there's this idea of a Cuban-American musician with all the political implications that may have, this idea of how we see Cuba as a free country. Is it free of the Castro regime, or is it free of the American blockade? And depending on what side of the aisle you may have a different idea of what the expression Cuba Libre, free Cuba, may mean. So I thought it was interesting. Also, I discovered that while I was creating the soggetto cavato, the word Cuba has this descending chromatic figure, and Libre has the ascending chromatic figure. So they're opposites, and they kind of like converge in this triton E flat. So it was just a funny coincidence, and it really has no significance, no musical significance. It's just part of this game, this playing attitude towards the material that I think liberates me at the onset of a piece of music. It makes this seems as something that contains a degree of levity that makes it easier to write music. It almost releases the burden of creating a work of music. This is just a game, and it's a serious game, but it's a game nonetheless. And then rearrange these two chromatic little figures, a pentachord and a tetrachord, and somehow that led to the motif that you see at the top of the screen on the right side. And then you can see in the piano part, this is the beginning of the piece, how I handled that. The first thing I did was the E flat I turned into an E natural simply because it sounded better. And then I applied a bunch of rotations in the style of Stravinsky, the way Stravinsky would have applied rotational permutations of the set, and that set this thing in motion. And again, not unlike you would with a short story, where you have a situation or a character, or it doesn't have to be a short story, but a narrative story. This is Raskolnikov killing his landlady at the onset of Crime and Punishment, and that's just the setting. That's the first thing that, of course, will create a cavalcade of events and incredible different diversions. And that's exactly what I do. And the first page shows precisely that that's what I'm going to do, because I think that's important. I think the first page should show what the piece is about, should give a hint of what kind of story this piece is going to tell. And I know this is not new. Every piece by Beethoven does that. If you ask me. But that's exactly what I'm aspiring to do here. I show what the pitch material is. I show what kind of processes I'm interested in creating. I show the kind of dynamic profile and the gestural quality of the piece will be, and then I just play with it and offer the result to my audience. Everything okay? Any questions or any interruptions or any comments, complaints? No? Because we can now listen to the piece. The piece is about 17 minutes in length. And again, it's called New Short Stories. This is a second version of the original work that I wrote for Christina. And in this one, I greatly expanded the material. I changed the orchestration. The original version was for piano and string orchestra. This is for a 15-member new music ensemble, still with a concertante or obbligato piano part, in this case played by Daniel Pesca, another familiar face for soundscape. And the ensemble is the Crossman Ensemble, this group that was created recently at the University of Chicago, and it's a really quite phenomenal group. The performance is live also, and took place at the end of 2018, I believe. So I'm just going to play the piece. I don't think it is practical to show the score. So just please listen to the piece. And after that, we'll come back and I will be happy to answer any questions or to comment on anything that you guys will have to say. Okay? Okay. Any questions? Complaints?
Victor.
Am I on? Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. I really enjoyed that. I think the Calvino quote that you the one about just the nonstop evolution of oneself, the spinning. Is that am I understanding correctly?
Mm-hmm.
I think that really brought the piece to life in the way I was listening to it. I could definitely hear that imagery really brought into life into the music, which was really amazing to listen to. My question is, you mentioned that you were encoding letters into Cuba Libre. Is that what you said?
I'm sorry, I couldn't understand the last thing you said.
You mentioned you encoded lettering, a slogan into the music, into the notes,
yes.
right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And you mentioned also that you didn't hold yourself strictly to that spelling out. You made changes wherever. Did you use that? Did you change the spelling in a developmental way? Was that one of the ways you evolved the message, or did you execute the process just more motivically?
The idea of using this code at the onset is really again, it has absolutely no bearing on the content of the piece. Really, it really is just a mechanism to get myself going, and it's a bit of a secret message to my player, in this case, because of this, Cuba Libre, this free Cuba. I mean, she got it because I told her, but even the pianist, she would not have associated, the idea of, free Cuba with the notes that she was hearing, because I completely bastardized the whole thing. So that really is of no importance. In this respect, I'm going to say something that may sound provocative. I don't mean it that way, but it is a little bit in line with something that actually Donatoni, I believe, said. Material for a piece of music is just anything, whatever you want to make it. And he used the appropriately culinary analogy of saying, it's like when you slaughter a pig. You slaughter the pig and you use everything from the blood to the nails to the entrails, and everything can be used, as long as it's cooked properly. And I think the same applies to this approach that I take. I just need something to generate, to spark this thing and to set it into motion. And the setting into motion, it's its own thing. It is subject to its own rules based on what I'm trying to do to get this piece moving and to get the material to go to places that are either, confirming what I was saying before, or that challenge it, that surprise you. And I think that's a very important thing. And this is, again, taking me back to this notion of the narrative quality of music. You write so that there is something to listen to and something to listen for. So you provide the listener with something that the listener will be new to the listener, so that the listener will listen to it, and then you provide something that will challenge that, or that will confirm that, so that the listener listens for. So you create a certain expectation that you either meet or you challenge. And that is really how I go about creating a structure, a musical structure. So the soggetto cavato, the code, is only important at the very beginning of a piece.
Thank you so much.
Next, we have Luca.
Carlos. Okay, first of all, thank you for mentioning two of my favorite writers, Monterroso and Cortázar. What I find really interesting and very original in your music is that it is indeed a narrative music, but it flows in a non-linear time. And I think it's quite rare to find this kind of attitude, and it's very similar maybe to the formal concept of Cortázar as a writer, a non-linear time but with a narrative structure. My question is, I'm curious about the first piece, the Marimba piece, and I would like to know, if possible, something about the two times of the piece. Your time as a composer, when you compose the piece, what kind of time you used? How was the time for you? And because during the performance of the piece, I've perceived like many different kind of times, I would know the time of the performance, how you want it, how did you organize it? Are the two times very different, or some of the time of the composer passed in the performance time?
Yeah, so thank you. When you refer to time, you're talking. Let me just make sure that I answer what you're referring to. When you talk about time, are you talking about, for example, the duration of sections, or are you talking about tempo, like speed, or both? Or can you tell me a little
I'm
bit about
speaking
what exactly?
about something more maybe metaphysical, about the perception of time. As composers, we can stop the time, or we can accelerate the time, or we can mold the time as we can make an action on the time, so the listener perceives the time exactly as we want. Okay, or maybe I hope it's possible, if possible. I was speaking about this kind of tempo of time, a musical time, like Stockhausen speaks of the musical time.
Oh boy, I am not sure I know how to answer that, to be honest. I can tell you something about how I wrote a piece. A good chunk of that piece was written straight on the computer, and I would literally it was written on Finale, so I would use Finale to audition it using a marimba sound. So it is a piece that was sequenced that way. So as I was composing the piece, I was actually listening to a performance of it that to me was ideal, in terms of tempo and in terms of the fluidity of the various passages and the interconnectivity between those passages. So in that respect, the composer's time and the performer's time should be the same, because I wrote the piece as a performance piece in that as I was writing it, I was performing it as well. Or, I wasn't performing it, but the computer was. It's an unusual way of writing, and I've done it a few times, actually. Well, it's unusual for the kind of composers that we are. I guess it's not unusual at all for most other musicians. Actually, everybody uses synthesizers and sequencers nowadays. But so I don't think this answers your question in a sufficiently elegant way. But basically, what I'm saying is, I wrote the piece as a performance a piece in that respect. So I don't see any difference between the compositional time and the performative time in that way. But I suspect that I'm not fully addressing what you're after, because I'm just not, learned enough.
No, I'm sorry. I've perceived the piece in a very strong non-linear way, the marimba piece. Mm-hmm. And now you're telling me that you composed it in a linear way, very linear. Yeah.
I did. Absolutely. Yeah.
Thank you.
So.
I think, Nolan, you had your hand up. Yes.
Yeah, just when you're talking about having this kind of childlike attitude towards play and writing and things like that, it kind of makes me think of like Stefan Nachmanovich's book Free Play and Improvisation. And I'm just wondering if you feel like you're improvising when you're composing sometimes. Is that kind of
I
how it
do.
is? Okay.
I do, absolutely, absolutely. And this is in a way, what I was talking about when I was addressing Lucas' question. It is, I create this initial material, and in that particular case of the marimba piece, I entered it into finale, and then I kind of improvised my way through it, by using this playback feature. For a piano piece, it's different because I actually do play the music on the piano. But for a piece like that, I needed to hear the sound of the marimba of some sort, in some way. I mean, and so I decided to do it that way. But yes, it does. It should feel like an improvisation, like a very good improvisation. Ideally, of course. I don't know if it does, but that's my aspiration. Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Sure.
Tony.
Hi, Carlos. Thank you so much for sharing those pieces with us. It was really great and great to hear your music. And I just wanted to comment on what I feel like is a feature of your music is that it's kinetic, and I've known this from pieces that I've sung of yours in the past and heard, and it all has this feeling of, gosh, I want to play that, because it has a certain kind of energy that performers really adore and really love to sink into. And I mean, it's hard, right? But also that challenge always seems worth it. It's worth the effort because of the payoff, the kinetic energy and the feedback that we get. So I just wanted to, say that, and also say that I really felt these performances were just terrific on all counts.
Yeah.
And it was, I was wanting to see them play too, because that's also part of it, right? That feeling of the energy is and of the effort is part of the experience as well.
Yeah.
So much.
Thank you, Tony. Yeah, well, I mean, about that, there's something I could say. It's a bit of an anecdote that some of you already know it because I have shared it in conversation. When I was beginning as a composer, starting out, I had a lesson with Lucas Foss, a composer that the newer generations don't know very well, but that was very important when I was, in my 20s. And he looked at a piece of mine that I had just written that was a bit like George Crombie, kind of, a note here, a note there, and very evocative, or tried to be evocative and atmospheric. And he looked at it and said, we had a little bit of a conversation beforehand, and he said, "Carlos, what are you doing? What are you doing?" It's like, "What do you mean? Yeah, this is pastoral. There isn't an ounce of anything pastoral in you. Look at you, look at how you talk, look at how you wave your hands when you talk, look at how, your phrases are all like going, kinetically, indeed. And this is not you, you should write the way you speak," he told me. And I took that very seriously, and indeed that is what I do. The reason why my music is kinetic is because I'm kind of anxious and nervous and neurotic, and because I don't take enough medication, probably. But so yes, and this is a very important thing. And I know that we'll probably need to wrap up. I don't know, but when I talk about narrative and a narrative quality of music, I'm really also talking about this. I'm talking about how I am interested in my music being a means of communication and also the vehicle of whatever expression is in me that I use both for speech and for music. So in other words, speaking and writing music is not different at all for me. It's the same thing. It expresses the same thing, only in different media. So that's why it needs to be narrative, and that's why it needs to be kinetic, and that's why it needs to share the kind of gestuality that is in me, that is part of who I am as a human being.
Thank you so much. That was such a wonderful opportunity to spend this hour together with you, Carlos, to get to hear your new pieces. Please, I will write Brent a note to congratulate him on that wonderful performance. Marimba solo. That was super impressive, and I just love that piano ensemble piece. That's amazing. So thank you so much for spending time with us, and we'll see everybody tomorrow at the same time.
Thank you, Carlos.
Thank you, everybody.
Gracias.
It's great to see you. De nada. Ciao.